everyone, welcome back to Read with Jo. I thought I'd read you another story today that I've written myself. This one's called Jeremiah Berg, Fig and Twitcher Pie. Are you ready? Fig and Twitcher Pie was a speciality of Mr. Jeremiah Berg. It contained figs from his ginormous fig tree in his garden, a whole bird, he wasn't funny which kind, the bonier the better, several worms and a baboon. Not a whole baboon, just half at a time, otherwise that would be greedy. Mr. Jeremiah Berg's childhood was lonely. He didn't have many friends. Well, when I say many, I mean zero. Nada in the lambada, nil, naught, zilch, zip, absolutely no one. When other children saw Jeremiah, they would chant, "The Burger Man, the Burger Man, the Burger Man." Berg was an unhappy child, and now he was an unhappy man too. Dressed in the same clothes for the past decade, you would be able to smell Jeremiah 100 paces away. Whew! His trousers were white when he first put them on, and now they were dark grey and slightly threadbare. A large piece of bubble gum had been squashed, smushed, crushed, pressed, smashed and quashed into the back pocket of his trousers, right on his left butt cheek. Once pink in colour, the bubble gum was now a tinge of brown from the dirt. Every time he sat down, a piece of gum would stretch from chair to butt. His shirt had been nibbled on by his pet rats. They weren't really pets. They just never moved out when they arrived. 2 holes and a semicircle had been bitten on the front of his dirty, smelly vest that Jeremiah wore constantly. The pattern looked like a grumpy face on his large, protruding belly. He was a dirty and a smelly. He was so dirty. A family of beetles had decided to set up home in his unruly curly hair. They had a constant supply of food due to Jeremiah's ears being full to the brim with earwax, the thick, yellow, gooey kind. Ooh. That was not all. Oh no, we cannot forget his beard. A mess of tangles with bits and pieces of spare food for whenever Jeremiah wanted food on the go. Even a bug or two would pop their head out, trying not to get eaten. Hello! No tangle teaser comb would ever get those tangles out. Jeremiah Berg wasn't known to be a domestic god either. His garden had become overgrown with weeds and rubbish, which had been dumped there for the past 10 years. A huge, smelly, rotten mountain of stale food, plastic bottles, sandwich packets, which had been formed in the centre of the small but stinky courtyard garden. Flies buzzed, buzz, 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 buzzed, and pooped continuously over the mound, just to add to the disgusting whiff that wafted over the garden fence and into the street up ahead. Quite often, the people passing by would add their rotten, out-of-date food to the ever-growing mountain of waste. Why make their bins smell when there was a perfectly good one free to use in Jeremiah's garden? It wouldn't be long before Berg couldn't see out of his window because of the mass of rubbish. It was Wednesday night, the night Jeremiah would have to go to the local zoo, not far away, and catch himself another baboon for his dinner. It took minutes of planning of how he was going to get away with it. He hadn't been caught yet, and he didn't intend to be caught now. It just so happens Jeremiah had dug a large tunnel from the bottom of his garden around the corner and of this housing estate and up to the street to the local zoo, but right into the baboon's cage. Armed with a large brown fraying sack and a dirty, grimy metal spade, Jeremiah marched towards the hatch door into the baboon's cage via the dirty tunnel. As he stomped through the tunnel, he would pull worms out of the mud and add them to his fraying sack too.
"All good tasty food. I'd be a fool to waste worms,"
said Jeremiah out loud to himself as he grimaced and started to lick his lips. The baboons lay quietly in their beds, snoring together, making nose-gurgling sounds. They had stuffed their faces with hot chocolate and raspberry jam and had fallen asleep listening to their favourite story, Rockabye Baboon. This was a daily bedtime treat if they had behaved nicely for the children that came to visit and stare at them through the glass screen throughout the day. On the glass, there was a large notice telling the children the names of the baboons. They were called Bob and Marge. Jeremiah opened the squeaky door hatch and saw a feast lay before him. Bob and Marge lay cuddled up together, quite content with their day. Jeremiah grabbed his dirty, half-broken spade and suddenly, boing! Marge, who had happened to be the largest baboon, had been bopped on her head and had started to grow an almighty bump that rose straight up in the air at an alarming rate. You could hang your coat on that, thought Jeremiah. Marge was so dizzy. She had pots of jam and cups of hot chocolate hovering in a circle above her head. Jeremiah shoved Marge into his sack and headed back to the dusty hatch in the cage. Just as Jeremiah thought he'd got away with it, Bob woke up and started sniffing with his enormous nostrils. One nostril started to sniff first, then the other, until his nose was completely stuck in the air, just like this. Led by the sniffly nose, Bob sprung to his feet quicker than you could say Jack Flash. He snatched the heavy brown fraying sack back with an almighty tug and stared at Jeremiah with a very nasty growl emanating from his clenched teeth. A tug of war broke out. Toing and throwing, pulling and pushing, huffing and puffing. The heavy sack landed with an almighty pump and a thump. A splutter of noise escaped from the sack as Marge had started to wake up. Meanwhile, Bob started to arch his arms like in a menacing manner and grimace at Jeremiah. The hair on the back of his neck had started to rise too, to a point straight to the cage's ceiling. His legs were in a springy stance, ready to pounce, and his chest seemed to grow twice the size as it was originally. Ooh. Oh, Maya. Oh dear, was Jeremiah in trouble?
"Hey, that's my dinner! I want that sack back!" shouted Jeremiah at the top of his voice, realising at this point he should have just run away. Suddenly, two long, hairy arms peeled back the opening of the large brown sack. It was Marge, and she was mad. The hugest, roughest, toughest looking baboon climbed out of the sack, steadied herself on the cage floor and stood right in front of Jeremiah Berg and grunted loudly. She too was standing like her mate next to her. Snot came flying, spraying out of Marge's nose and splashed on Berg's face. Her hands were making fish shapes and started to shake with almighty anger. She looked really, really mad. "Get back in my sack, you're my dinner," Jeremiah said, whilst quivering and wondering how he was going to get out of this particular situation. In a flash, the hugest, roughest, toughest baboon took the spade from Jeremiah. With an almighty swift hand movement, Jeremiah found himself in a large brown sack, wondering if he was now dinner. Jeremiah wiggled and he jiggled, moaned and groaned and started to panic. After several seconds of, "Let me out of here!" the top of the sack peeled open very slowly. A large brown pupil looked at Jeremiah. Bob's eye jerked from side to side, whoop, whoop, up and down, whoop, whoop, until he was sure Berg wasn't going anywhere. When Berg was pulled, rather roughly I might add, out of the sack, he found himself in the corner of the baboon's cage. He had been dumped in leftover banana skins, orange peel and baboon's poo, which was stuck to old pieces of straw. Yuck, he smelled even worse than before. Sitting in front of Jeremiah, there were two very, very large and angry baboons, Bob and Marge. They were large, hairy and mad. Steam pushed its way out of their ears in the shape of railway tracks. Huge puffs of hot breath and large drops of nose snot made angry-shaped trains chugging on the steamy railway tracks. Oh my, they were menacing. Berg wondered if he had bitten off more than he could chew this time. A large black pot with bubbling water had started to get extremely hot and frothing water ran over the edge. Steam bellowed out and a faint aroma of bananas, figs, worms and oranges wafted over and filled Jeremiah's nostrils. The worms had been taken from his brown sack. It seemed the baboons liked to eat them too. Berg decided to wiggle and jiggle, muttering desperate helps to himself as he anxiously tried to escape the pile of rotting food. Berg decided he had to escape quickly. He didn't want to be baboon food. When Jeremiah thought Marge and Bob weren't looking, he shot up, slid on a pile of poo, but still tried to make a run for it. With one long, hairy arm, Bob grabbed Jeremiah and shoved him into the hot, wet, frothy water. The baboons started laughing. Ha, 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 ha! They had menacing grins on their faces and a twinkle in their eyes. Ding! Bob even had saliva dripping from his huge yellow teeth. "Your supper and we're hungry," muttered the baboons and carried on peeling extra fruits and vegetables to add to the Berg hot pot. One by one, the ingredients were added to the black cooking pot, including Jeremiah. The water in the black pot had started to get so hot, Jeremiah jumped up and down, trying to cool himself off. The bottom of the pot was so positively burning, the soles of his shoes had melted to slippery skates. Jeremiah's jumps were getting higher and higher, and the pot was becoming hotter and hotter. He kept sliding on the fruit peel that had made it into the hot pot. At least his clothes were getting a good wash. Jeremiah had an idea, a bit of a brainwave, a good thought. Berg grabbed the burning handle of the large black pot with an "ooh" and an "ow", swung himself over the edge of the large bubbling pot and jumped right out of the hot, hot water. He ran and skidded faster than he had ever ran and skidded before towards the cage hatch door. Dripping with hot water, wafting of fruit and worms, and the odd fig was caught in his hair and beard. Berg lifted the hatch door and slid down the hole. His now clean clothes were getting dirty again, but he didn't care about that. He threw himself into the dirty tunnel. As he turned to slam the hatch door shut, a huge, hairy arm caught the handle of the door. "Oh, you're not going anywhere," snarled Marge with a menacing grimace as she tried to squeeze her enormous body through the tiny escape hatch. Luckily, the hatch door was too small for the large baboon to fit through it. As Jeremiah looked back, he could see a large hairy arm reaching inside the hole, trying to feel for something to grab hold of. Berg continued to run, hop, jump, slide, anything to get home, just to get him home back safely. Because his trousers had been washed in extremely hot water, they had stretched both sideways and long ways. He had scrambled through the muddy tunnel. As he scrambled through the muddy tunnel, his trousers started to fall down to his ankles and left a fruity trail mark on the ground behind him. After tripping up with his trousers most of the way back home, which was still dangling around his ankles, Jeremiah hoped he hadn't been followed. He finally made it back to his smelly garden. Whew, that was close, Berg thought. With no baboon, how was Jeremiah able to make fig and twitcher pie? Berg opened the grease-covered cupboard in his kitchen. Dust puffed in a bloom of clouds and smoke and covered his face. Berg sneezed the biggest sneeze ever. Achoo! Droplets of green snot covered his wholey vest. Snot was free, he thought, and so was dust. Could snot and dust really work? I guess it stuck together, Jeremiah said to himself, whilst wiping his hands down the front of his vest top. Luckily for Jeremiah, he hadn't dusted for years. The whole body was covered with thick, grimy dust. You know, the kind of dust that doesn't come off with a cloth or a polish. The kind of dust that had to be scraped off with a spatula. Snot was plentiful. He was always sneezing because of the dust and dirt in his house. Berg thought hard. He realised he couldn't eat any more baboons. What could he eat instead? Washing powder? No, too clean. Mothballs? No, not smelly enough. Dust, snot and beetle soup. Now that sounds absolutely lovely, Berg said to himself. He had a beetle's nest in the back garden as well as in his hair, and it was all free. Now Jeremiah Berg is not a tidy man. He still wears his dirty trousers with the bubblegum stain, the vest with rat holes in, but he's both happy and very smelly at the same time. He stands by his front gate and smiles at people, allowing them to see his tea-stained teeth, the vest with rat holes in, and even a little food waving from time to time. His garden is still overgrown with weeds, and there is still the mountain of rubbish and food with the smell reaching people 2 streets along now. He isn't known for making twitcher pie anymore. He's known for making twitcher soup now. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope to speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.